Redistricting battles are raging across the country as both parties push to carve out congressional districts that boost their chances in midterm elections later this year. With all of these fights happening, it can be hard to keep track of where all the different cases stand. Good thing we have the Hill's courts and legal reporter, Zach Schonfeld, who's been following these cases as they happen all over the map. Let's start, Zach, in Virginia, where the state Supreme Court made a key decision that Democrats are happy about. What can you tell us about that?
Hey, Drew, this fight in Virginia has now really become in front and center in this mid-decade redistricting war. But legally speaking, it's quite different than the cases that we've been following over these last few months in Texas and California, for example. Whereas those cases all involved questions about race, this is a case that all involves procedure. And that's because this is a battle that all revolves around the fact that Virginia has part of its constitution, a constitutional amendment that had specific procedures for how redistricting had to go. So now for Democrats to try to pass this new map halfway through the decade, they actually have to go through a process of re-amending the Constitution, which is not so simple as just passing a new map through the legislature. They've got to pass it in two separate sessions that then will go to voters for a referendum. So that leaves us to where we are today, and that is that the courts are still hearing this challenge. It is going now to the Virginia Supreme Court. But as the Virginia Supreme Court will now take up this question and deciding whether Virginia Democrats are following all of the procedural requirements and whether they've actually posted some of the maps and some of these procedures with enough time, they are meanwhile allowing that referendum to move forward. So for voters in Virginia, you're going to have that election. It's coming up on April 21st, a referendum to pave the way for this new map. But then there's going to be a question after that referendum is finished, assuming that it does pass. Then the question will be, what is the Virginia Supreme Court going to do? Because, Drew, if the Virginia Supreme Court strikes it down, it might mean that this referendum that's about to happen in Virginia in April might not mean anything for the midterms.
All right, let's head over to Missouri. There was a hearing on redistricting last week. What was it about, and when can we expect a ruling from the judge?
Yeah, this is another one that has to do with the state constitution, but a bit of a different issue in Missouri as compared to Virginia. This is the fact that Missouri has a provision in its state constitution that says when the state legislature passes some new piece of legislation, voters can actually enact what they call a veto referendum, essentially a voter-led initiative that actually overrules something that the state legislature passed. And, you know, a map is just like any other state law. And now you're seeing this effort underway to try to block this Missouri map that could potentially add up to one more Republican seat. So as you mentioned, Drew, where we're at right now, still working its way through the courts. We just had a hearing last week. And now we're just waiting on the ruling. Keep refreshing my email to see if it hits my inbox. Nothing yet, but that key ruling there on Missouri as to whether Republicans are going to get that seat.
Meanwhile, in New York, we have a Republican representative asking the U.S. Supreme Court to step in over redistricting in her state. What can you tell us about that? And do you think the court will actually get involved in this specific case?
This is one that actually isn't a map that has been passed as part of this mid-decade redistricting arms race. This is actually a lawsuit that goes back further. And says that this map that New York had passed earlier on in the census, specifically this is a lawsuit that focuses on a district in New York City, the Staten Island district, the 11th district, currently represented by Republican Representative Nicole Malliotakis. And a state judge had struck down the map, saying that it diluted the power of Black and Latino voters in violation of the state constitution. So where that left things is the state judge said, okay, New York, you need to draw a new map for this district before the elections can be held this year in the midterms. So as of right now, if nothing was to change in the courts, this district has to be redrawn, and it could potentially, depending on how it's redrawn, it could give Democrats a pickup opportunity. That is why you are now seeing Congresswoman Malliotakis bring this to the U.S. Supreme Court. She is asking for an emergency ruling that would halt all of this for the midterms, would restore her district. She has accused this lower judge of exceeding their authority. And she says, actually, by ordering this new district and ordering that the Staten Island district has to be redrawn, she says if you go along with this, it would actually run into the federal Constitution's equal protections. So a lot of issues there, but it's all going to be up to the 9 justices here in D.C.
All right, let's continue our tour of the country and go to Utah. There's a key hearing in federal court coming up on Wednesday as 2 Republican representatives are challenging their state's map. How does that work given that the map was court ordered, and what should we be looking for in this hearing?
Yeah, this is another one of these cases that isn't some new map that lawmakers have gone back to the drawing board as a result of this arms race that began in Texas. This is another one of these long-running redistricting cases that even if, none of this redistricting war this last year would have happened, this case would have still been going on. The reason we are talking about Utah in particular right now is because a judge, as you mentioned, Drew, has struck down that Utah map that split up the Salt Lake City area, potentially giving Democrats a pickup opportunity there. And so now that a state judge has ordered that a court-ordered new map, you are now having Republicans take this case to federal court and trying to get a federal court to block this state judge ruling. They are arguing that the state judge is exceeding their authority in ordering the state to go back and draw this new map that would potentially give Democrats a pickup opportunity. So we are now waiting for these arguments that are going to be taking place just this week on Wednesday, and then it will be up to the federal court to decide, are the Utah state courts here overstepping their authority, and what should happen for Utah's map moving forward, including for this year's midterms.
All right, so in addition to those, what other cases and states are you keeping an eye on to figure out what's going to happen with this redistricting battle?
Well, this is a picture, Drew, that's really been changing day by day. A lot of the states we just went through, have been new lawsuits that have just been popping up just in the last few weeks and months. So I do think, first of all, this is going to be something that is going to continue to evolve. That being said, one state I'll also be watching for in particular these next few weeks is Florida. This is in a bit of an earlier stage right now as compared to those other states. We have no court ruling yet in the case in Florida. This is just a lawsuit that's just getting underway this month as now state legislatures seek to go back as part of this special session called by Governor Ron DeSantis to try to get Republicans more pickup opportunities in Florida. There's now this lawsuit that says Governor DeSantis has no authority to call this special session. I'll be watching this court case very closely in the next coming weeks because it'll be one to watch and add to the list of states here, Drew.
All right, always great catching up with you. And obviously, with all these cases out there, we'll continue to check on with you throughout the year. But for now, we'll leave it at that. Zach Schonfeld, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.